When you need a lawyer, how do you find the right one? Contact the Chicago Bar Association.
Whether you've been injured or need a will prepared, whether you're buying a home or starting a business, having the right lawyer is essential. The Chicago Bar Association have lawyers who practice in most areas of law and speak a variety of languages.
Don't leave it to chance. Get a referral to a screened, experienced lawyer. Visit chicagobar.org or call 312-554-2001. The Chicago Bar Association. Se habla español.
Welcome to You and the Law, a Chicago Bar Association production focusing on matters of law and policy for the benefit of the general public. We try to make this educational and really not just for lawyers. Hopefully lawyers are watching this, but we try to make it useful for, like I said, the general public, lay people who are not lawyers, but who are nonetheless navigating legal and policy issues on a daily basis. And we have a special show today because it's very timely. We've done one fairly recently, but things have sort of increased in the streets in terms of federal and ICE presence and concerning developments that are continuing to happen. And there's been commentary by the governor on it. It's in the news. There's no way it's in our communities. And we have people with us who have deep experience, knowledge as advocates, as lawyers, as people trying to do the right thing and make our communities, more resemble the ideals that we aspire to and we took oaths, to defend as lawyers. So I'd like to introduce them. We have Alexandra Lopez, John Heiderscheidt, Amanda Garcia, and I'm going to go to each one of them to provide a little bit of background on what they bring to the table in terms of their education experience, whatever they want to, insights they have from practicing in the trenches, so to speak, at a time when I think it's probably very difficult to practice this area of law because there's very little consistency. And not to get too, focused on a particular issue at the outset, but I think people, I think, broadly agree there's been some weaponization of immigration policy, which has probably undermined rule of law and the ideals that we have in mind when we talk about rule of law. So with that, I'd like to start with Alexandra Lopez. Please tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hi, good morning. Thank you, Mike, for having me. I am a co-founding and managing partner of Cunningham Lopez, based out of Chicago, Cunningham Lopez LLP, where I supervise and head the immigration practice. I originally started as a litigator in state and federal court and quickly got sucked in to immigration, which is what I now primarily focus on and have focused on for, let's say, the last 10 years. Our practice it revolves around family-based immigration, humanitarian-based claims, as well as removal defense, including detained removal cases, which is a particularly sensitive matter right now. We also take on federal cases in the immigration context, such as habeas corpus claims, which have been arising more and more recently.
Thanks very much, John. Let's turn it to you.
Well, hi, I'm John Heiderscheidt. Thank you so much for having me here. It's a privilege to be with you all and to have this discussion. I'm the founder and managing attorney of Subscription Lawyer. Our firm is located on the north side of Chicago, and we represent immigrant clients who make affirmative applications for benefits, and we also represent clients who are in removal defense needs, who have removal defense needs. We help clients look at vacating old criminal convictions that can be problems if you apply to achieve some sort of benefit with USCIS or visa or whatnot. We'll help people look at vacating their old criminal convictions. And I would say our practice is kind of similar to what Attorney Lopez described her practice to be as well. Some similarities there. I've been working in immigration since the tail end of the Obama administration. I've been through Trump 1, I've been through Biden, and now we're all kind of living through as best we can Trump 2, which is very, very different, more harsh, more aggressive, and abusive of due process or obstructive of due process rights for immigrant clients right now. And hopefully we'll talk more about that in this show, but that's some of my background. Thanks for having me.
Thanks, John. Appreciate it. Amanda, can you share a little bit about your background and practice?
Certainly. Hello, everyone. Glad to see you here. My name is Amanda Garcia, and I've also been practicing or involved with immigration law since the end of the Obama administration. Most recently, in the past 7 years, I've been either delivering or managing the Legal Orientation Program, which was a legal access program funded by Congress and under the Immigration Court to make sure that people who don't have attorneys had some access to a help desk or education within a detained setting. So there were many versions of those legal access programs offered through the immigration court, really to help immigration judges deal with respondents that didn't know what to expect or didn't know what their obligations were or what options they had within a removal case. So I did that for about past 7 years. Unfortunately, with all of the cuts to government programming, all of those programs were stopped, terminated at the beginning of the year, and only a couple have survived through some litigation that remains ongoing. But I've really stopped doing that work since April and have now turned my attention with Acacia towards more court watch programs. So hopefully I'll get a chance to talk about that, but that's where I'm at now.
Absolutely. Thanks very much. And I like to kind of point out there, throughout the course of this, be encouraged for sure to identify resources that residents can turn to. Because what I'd like to do is, obviously highlight the legal issues, some of the policy issues that are driving it, certainly with a rule of law and constitutional law, democracy lens, but also to provide real-time resources that people can turn to because there are emergencies in our communities right now, and you guys are on the front lines of that in many ways. With that, John, I'd like to turn to you. This might be a really good jumping off point in terms of substance. You had a fairly kind of high profile speaking engagement in the last couple of weeks on this series of issues, which I think strikes very deep in terms of the reality of our socio-political and legal structures. And if you can share, of course, it was a long discussion, but if you can share some high points and themes that came across there that might be relevant here, I'd appreciate that.
Yeah, sure. I had the privilege to speak with Archbishop Supich at an event co-sponsored by the Chicago Bar Association. I'm the chair of the Immigration Law and Nationality Committee of the Chicago Bar Association. I was last year and am this year. And in connection with the public affairs group, we were able to have the Archbishop come and speak on some of the issues we're seeing from a humanitarian perspective, as well as I lended some color on the legal perspectives as well. We had about 250 people at the Union League Club, and I'm hoping, I think the conversation was recorded, so you might be able to fish that out. But what we really focused on was the fact that whether you're a person with status or without status, quote unquote, under the Immigration and Nationality Act, we're all people and we're all entitled to the same dignity and we're all entitled to the same rights of due process under the law. And I think what's so disheartening right now is we're seeing an administration that, I'll use the phrase that I hear all the time, flood the zone. Well, what that's code for is making due process unachievable for so many people by forcing every immigrant in the United States, with or without status, to be able to run into a district court on a moment's notice and file a habeas corpus petition when 45 days ago the same person would have been classified and treated as an alien present who's entitled to proceedings in a non-detained court administered by the Department of Justice. And in effect, what we reinforce is sometimes something I unfortunately see in the criminal system as well, is that two-tier system of justice in America where people with funds can access the best and people without can access the rest. And, it's a very coordinated strategy to make due process unachievable and unaffordable. And I'll leave this thought with some of my co-guests to enter or to chime in or think how they're viewing it in their practices right now. But it's just been very overwhelming, and it's pushed due process beyond the boundaries of what it should be in the United States, and that makes it very, very hard to be able to defend rights that Congress has said you have. And it ties back to this idea of the unilateral executive that we saw back in the Iraq war days, that the executive now believes in certain situations that it is the only and supreme branch of government, and that couldn't be farther from what the founders envisioned or gave us. They gave us a republic with a tripartite government that checks and balances each other and has the people at its foundation. And, we see this in the immigration context today. I promise you that if we put an asterisk next to due process, the whole game is up and the exception will be applied in every venue. But, I really appreciate what Attorney Garcia has done or mentioned that she had done to create those programs for people who have a harder time, who are not as financially situated and can't get the best of attorneys to run into court for them at a moment's notice. And, I really appreciate, I'm sure, as she's seen the funding for those programs cut, we see another way in which process is abused.
For sure, there's so much there, and rather than pick something out, I'm gonna pass on to Alexandra to see where she'd like to pick up, because there's like 5 directions that I have instincts to travel, but we have limited time. Alexandra, go on.
Sure. I think what John touched on was something that you and I spoke about, Mike, earlier, which is that the executive is trying to take control, and we need an independent court system for, immigration proceedings. Right now, it being under the executive branch, what it is doing is it's really limiting what attorneys can do to advocate for their clients. And unless you have an attorney who is comfortable filing in federal court, many clients are left without opportunity or resources to kind of challenge what the immigration judges, as part of the executive, are doing and the decisions that they're making. And I think an intended or unintended consequence is that a lot of practitioners, immigration practitioners, are actually leaving the practice, a lot of solo practitioners, or they're declining to take on clients who are in detention, who are arguably the clients that need the representation the most. Because we have this ethical dilemma of, should we take on a client? Should we charge people for our services when we know that maybe they don't have the resources to pay? Nonprofits are at capacity and can't take on every case that we refer to them. And while we want to help, we can't take on every case, right, pro bono. And so many attorneys, for mental health reasons, are now leaving it all together, which is probably one of the intended consequences of this administration, but as advocates, certainly an unintended consequence. And those of us that have decided to continue on, to continue fighting, are really stretched thin, and maybe, we aren't, I don't want to say able to give as much as we would like, but ultimately we do need to be selective in the cases that we take, and those are the ones that have probability of success, a high probability of success, which means that a lot of people are being left behind.
Yeah, totally. I'll just kind of contrast that against the backdrop of this, which was on Friday through the Illinois Bar Foundation, which is the charitable arm of the Illinois State Bar Association. We had our annual gala, and what that group does fundamentally is raise funds for a variety. It's charitable arm of the ISBA. It raises funds and develops its own, but also supports programs that are focused on, one of the big things is access to justice. And that's a principal issue. So And the Bar Foundation has done tremendous things in that regard. But you see the effort that goes into that, just getting those doors open, having people be able to interact with our legal structures. And then you see there's a lot of heart in that group, but then you see what it's up against. And it's not just focused on immigration. I mean, that group is broadly, embracing and advancing that principle. But then you leave the ballroom, the black tie event at the Four Seasons, you go out in the streets and you see completely the opposite of those ideals on multiple fronts. There are two things, and I don't want to talk too much. I want to pass it on to you, but there are two things that stick out very prominently, among other things. But these two would be the due process violations are major. That is, you cannot have substantive justice without procedural justice. To see that actively attacked, diminished, degraded is a major problem that should go right to the central nervous system of legal institutions and lawyers and people who are out there. It's an issue of civics. It's beyond lawyers. We're just kind of the first line. Second, related to that, and this kind of makes me think of course, the Dick the Butcher, let's kill all the lawyers from Henry VI or whichever one it is, which the idea is to take power. This group of bandits wants to dispense with the rule of law. So when we see lawyers leaving the practice because it's unsustainable, or not, even if not leaving the practice, but shying away, and I shouldn't say shying because it's very difficult, and you guys have all taken those cases, it comes at cost and risk to your practice, to your bottom line, to your physical and mental well-being at times, because you're dealing with people who are in about the most traumatic scenarios when you have families being torn apart. And to see lawyers being purposely driven out is quite concerning. And it is the kind of thing that I think requires our legal institutions, everything from the law schools to our bar associations, to continue to band together in fellowship to push back against that and keep the rule of law machinery clean. So that's my kind of just general take, and why we ought to all be paying attention to this, not just the immigration practitioners. Let's share some resources. We have some time to chat still, but I want to make sure we put out some resources that everyday people, and some who are targets, which the scope of the targets is getting bigger and bigger, and less, and more indiscriminate, it seems. And there, when you have federal troops and or National Guard or ICE, in our communities, they're terrorizing people. There are families who don't know if they're going to be together next week, who've been together for decades. Not sustainable, real emergency. What are some resources that are available for folks who have these fears, concerns, or even active, legal administrative issues they're dealing with?
I'll jump in on that. So I think I can share my screen. Let's see if I have the power to do that. I think I do. So y'all see the Illinois Immigration Information website?
Yep.
Okay, good. So this is illinoisimmigrationinfo.org. This was put together by the Illinois Coalition for Immigrant and Refugee Rights, ICER, along with a few other nonprofit organizations around Illinois. As my co-presenters have mentioned, it's really difficult for immigration attorneys to even accept cases right now and really determine, like, how can I help this person? And I don't know what to charge them. So a lot of people are navigating this on their own. A lot of families are trying to figure this out. So this website is an excellent hub to find updated information in all of these languages, to see, okay, what can I do? The family support hotline does a couple things. If you've had a family member or a friend or a coworker detained and you don't know what to do, or maybe you were relying on that individual for, that was the breadwinner in your household, this hotline will take you to ICER, and they may be able to connect you with resources like mutual aid and food resources, maybe some housing help, who knows. But they can also potentially connect you with legal help as well. But there's some information on here, what to do, how to prepare for an ICE encounter. There's a lot that can be done in preparation for ICE enforcement. It's important to know your rights, but a lot of this is about planning. The scary thing right now is since we don't know where ICE is going to show up and we don't know if they're going to follow the rules, you can almost count on them not following the rules at this point, and it makes it really demoralizing when you're trying to explain to people you have rights, you don't have to open the door. And then to know that the reality is they may break down your door, they may break out your car window, and then you may or may not have a hearing after that. You probably won't have a hearing. Um, so a lot of what people can do right now is prepare. That may be emergency planning for your family, which means putting together temporary guardianship forms, which in Illinois are fabulous because they don't have to be notarized, they don't have to be witnessed by an attorney, but naming who are the individuals that will have temporary custody of my children if I'm detained. And those are good for a full year. Also, things like doing power of attorneys for, okay, who can go pick up my last paycheck for me? Or who has the authority over my car? um, or just knowing like, okay, if I get detained, where are the extra keys and who knows where those extra keys are so that they can go get my car off the side of the road. So there's a lot of planning that people can do um, if they feel like they're at risk of detention, but also for communities. We're very lucky in Illinois to have a rapid response network, which is also kind of around that family support hotline. So whoever you are, wherever you are in Illinois, you can be a part of an existing rapid response team, or you can start to create one in collaboration with ICER. So that's about, it's kind of a combination of mutual aid, supporting the people in your community that need that help, but also keeping your eyes open and recording what's
Mhm.
happening.
Yeah, this is when you put it in those terms, it really, I mean, it sounds like almost it's like estate planning and will drafting, except it's imminent. It's like you better prepare because things are going to change in ways you never expected out of nowhere now. And that is terrorizing communities. There are entire sectors of our communities that are afraid to not just interact with government structures, but even go to work. People who are paying taxes too. A lot of these people are working and paying taxes and not taking anything out of the system because they're afraid to even interact with it and have been here for decades. So this is highly concerning. Thanks for sharing some of those resources. Alexandra and John, if you want to kind of chime in with some resources or further commentary you're familiar with, please go ahead. Share what you got.
The NIJC has been great. I know that they've taken some cases that I've referred to them, but it sounds like the website that Attorney Garcia shared might be the easiest place to start because there are a lot of subcategories there. Unfortunately, as I mentioned, a lot of nonprofits are at capacity, and so I would suggest also starting to just speak to immigration attorneys in advance, which is a service that I think a lot of attorneys are offering, are discounted or even free consults, just to provide some resources and assess a person's specific situation, because no two situations are going to be alike. So the advice we would give one client might be, different advice to another client, especially for their family members. Who should their family call? Which attorney should they call? Should they be getting bond funds together, or will they not be eligible for a bond, right? And those are things that if you have that knowledge, kind of at least a little bit of a legal strategy in advance, I found that to be really helpful, or at least give families peace of mind that they do have a plan ready, a legal strategy ready if a family member gets detained. So I would suggest consulting with any of these nonprofits or a private attorney just to have a plan in place and know what options are going to be available if you or one of your family members gets detained.
Thanks very much, John.
I'm not sure how much more I could add. I think Attorney Lopez and Attorney Garcia did a great job mentioning the sort of free resources that are out there. The one I'll say is that's specific to habeas proceedings. If you're an attorney who's not familiar with those, there's a platform called habeasdockets.org. And you can go there, and that platform is keeping track of all the habeas proceedings across the U.S. and you can access the templates that have been filed and everything. So you can really learn a lot about the pleadings. And
Right.
it's in through several circuits. So that's great. One thing I do kind of want to highlight that I think explains why it's hard to find resources, or that there's not a ton there, is because the law is written in a very harsh way already, and it's not really forgiving. And it's being interpreted in a way by the executive that it hasn't been interpreted in a very long time. And a big problem with immigration law is that immigration law can change based on an election. Personal
Hmm.
injury law isn't like that. Criminal law isn't like that. Bankruptcy law isn't like that. But depending on who wins an election, an attorney general gets appointed, and they can issue precedent decisions. And then all of a sudden, something that's been done one way for 8 years is done a completely new way. And then a new president comes in, puts their AG in, and revokes it. And so there's all this
There's no
contradictory
consistency.
law out there. But the
Right.
way to address this is we need to combine our resources and get into lobbying for legislation that fixes this and
Hmm.
puts these immigration decisions back squarely within Congress's control. Because Article 1,
Hmm.
Section 8 of the Constitution delineates the responsibility for naturalization to Congress, not to the executive. And
Got
if
it.
we create a different kind of civil court system for immigrants that's congressional in nature and not an administrative kangaroo court that's part of the Department of Justice,
Hmm.
we may see less detentions in the future. And that's,
Right.
I think, what everybody's hoping for. You know,
For sure.
the other hard thing is that the Supreme Court has not really been friendly in recent decisions. And their attitude is, if you have a problem, file a form with the agency that's done wrong to you.
Right.
I
Of
don't
course, the
know.
problem there, yeah, the problem there is well, we just addressed those. We're not sure how it's going to play out. The procedures are not in place, and the processes are being modified and degraded. But I wanted to share this because we're at 1 minute, and we're not going to have too much time to talk about it, but I kind of want to bring it back. I showed this, we talked about this before we got started, and this is just the door of my kid's school. Dropped them off at school. They've got their little picture, their kindness matters with the image. Let's change the world together. And maybe you don't think about that too much, but like when we think about these issues, and we think about the community, there's no separation anymore on these things. So like as lawyers in the so-called learned and noble profession, we can intellectualize things, but it really comes back to kind of kindergarten stuff and fairness, equality, human dignity. And we're like totally out of time right now. We have about 30 seconds left. So I just wanted to say thank you to each of you. Like, I really admire what you guys have been doing. I'm inspired with it. As you know, I've kind of had my own kind of issues that I've been trying to advance in the bar, but they're totally related to this. And I think it's really, what makes me love the law. And I see that coming from all of you too. And I hope the viewers, see the passion that you have and the dedication to it. So with that, thanks everybody. Thanks for watching this episode of You and the Law.